Okay, so let's go to the next category of patient or staff member or doctor, and we'll go into the choleric. So now we're going to go into the dominant choleric personality. So let's go into the categories again, emotions, and we'll do strengths and weakness. So the strengths: born leader, dynamic and active, compulsive, need for change, must correct wrongs, strong-willed, decisive, unemotional, not easily discouraged, independent and self-sufficient, exudes confidence, can run anything. So those are the strengths in the emotional category. The weaknesses in the emotional category: bossy, impatient, quick-tempered, can't relax, too impetuous, enjoys controversy and arguments, won't give up when losing, comes on too strong, inflexible, is not complimentary, dislikes tears and emotions, is unsympathetic. Okay, and I'll share a story with you. I'm a dominant personality at work. So when I learned this, I didn't realize how I naturally offended people. I didn't realize that. In other words, a high choleric, will naturally offend people without even knowing it. So one of the things that I did when I had my staff meetings, because just my tone, my body language comes across assertive and fast and strong and abrupt, okay? That's just a choleric personality. So one of the things that I always did purposefully at the end of every staff meeting, because I knew I just offended everybody without even knowing I offended everybody, just because that was my natural behavior. So one of the things I did after every staff meeting, because of this, is I reminded my staff, say, hey, and then I softened up. I said, hey, just want to remind you, I know I come across strong, my tone, my voice. I said, I know it's easily to be offended. I just want you to be assured that I don't mean to offend anybody here, but I know I naturally can. So I just want you to know. So I had to give reassurance regularly to my staff that, I knew that I was offending them, but that, how I moved and my tone and my voice, that's just who I am. That's just, again, these are personality characteristics. Okay, so let's go to the work category of the choleric personality. Goal-oriented, sees the whole picture, organizes well, sees practical solutions, moves quickly to action, delegates works, insists on production, makes the goal, stimulates activity, thrives on opposition. Okay. So a choleric's really good if you want to get stuff done, all right? You want to push forward, get stuff done, that's a good personality. Let's go to the negative part of work. Little tolerance for mistakes, doesn't analyze the details, bored by trivia, may make rash decisions, may be rude or tactless, manipulates people, demanding of others, ends justifies the means, work may become as God, demands loyalty in the ranks. So that's the negative component relative to work. And then let's go into the friend category. Has little need for friends, will work for group activity, will lead and organize, is usually right, excels in emergencies. And the negative characteristics of the choleric or the dominant personality is tends to use people, dominates others, decides for others, knows everything, can do everything better, is too independent, possessive of friends and mate, can't say I'm sorry, may be right, but unpopular. So that's the negative part. So how does this relate to the doctor, the staff, and the patients? Okay, so a lot of small business owners, by the way, have a primary choleric or melancholy characteristic. That's one of the characteristics of a small business owner, because it fits a lot of the characteristics of what you have to do to be self-employed. So how does this relate to the doctor? The bad news is the doctor who doesn't understand this. Like me, before I understood this, I easily offended a lot of staff members and, just naturally. So from a doctor's perspective, you really have to, when you're working with staff, you really have to tone it down. You got to remind yourself. And like I said, I already knew I was going to do it no matter what, just accidentally, even if my idea of toning down was still offensive. So I still had, that's why I decided at the end of every staff meeting, just remind everybody, I didn't mean to be offensive, but I know that's how I come across naturally. So we gotta, as a high choleric doctor, you've got to really learn to back off the staff because it's real easy to push people away. And I tell you, a doctor that doesn't know this will offend a lot of staff members, and he'll lose them because eventually staff members won't put up with this. So that's a real important factor. Now, when we look at the staff member, we go, okay, what's good about the staff member in the different positions? Well, how's that for the front desk person? Well, this is a very important part of it, the front desk person, because it's confrontational. What's confrontational with the front desk person is time and money. Collecting money is confrontational. Scheduling patients, asking them for long periods of time is confrontational, especially calling back patients that missed appointments. That's confrontational. Okay? Well, the choleric won't have any trouble doing that. To them, it's not confrontational at all. So they'll easily be able to do those things. And same with marketing. When we go into marketing, we have to engage people. It can be a little bit confrontational because we're not just playing to get along, we're actually engaging people. Well, a choleric does well at that too. So a typical choleric personality will do good in marketing. How does it relate to the patients? Well, if we have a choleric personality patient, here's the good news and bad news about the choleric personality patient. Most people, when they don't understand, they think that the choleric personality is the hardest patient to deal with. They're actually the easiest. They will make a decision real fast. They are the decision maker. They won't have to, check with their spouse. And they'll make it fast. So that's actually the easiest person, but it doesn't come to make a decision, for care and all that stuff. But it doesn't come across that way because they're abrupt and this way. So when I deal with a choleric personality as a patient, some of the phrases that I use this phrase all the time with choleric patients. I said, tell you what, I can tell you're I can tell you're kind of a strong, independent person. Let me just give you the information and you just tell me what you want to do with it. See, they love that. In other words, what I just told them is you're in control. I'm recognizing that you want control and I'm going to give you control. But by saying that, it allowed me to give the information without him being abrupt and abusive to me. Okay? And typically it works real well. When they have all the information, they'll make a decision like this and go, yeah, makes sense. Count me in. I mean, that's typically how it happens. So, but you also got to be careful. They'll abuse the schedule. They'll abuse your treatment schedule. They'll abuse your time. You got to be careful about things like that. Okay, so that has to do with the staff. That has to do with the doctor. That has to do with the positions in the office. And this is why, by the way, I'll never have two primary choleric personalities. You can never have two choleric personalities responsible for the same thing. They will always butt heads because both of them want control. So you can never have, so even if it's the same job, I'll take half of the alphabet of that, whatever that job is. Okay, now you're responsible for this and you're responsible for this. See, now they're not butting heads and they're in control of their own category. But that becomes very important. Now, the reason I say that is if you have a choleric melancholy insurance person or therapist and you have a choleric melancholy front desk person, well, that has the potential for butting heads, especially if they don't know this. They'll naturally butt heads. But the reason they'll butt heads is they'll overlap categories. So the therapist person, let's say they're both the same, choleric melancholy type. They want to be in control. Well, the therapist will try to get into the job responsibilities and categories of this person, the front desk person, and the front desk person will do the same thing with that. So from a management standpoint, I have to recognize that. And I have to say, no, you're responsible for your categories. You stay out of their categories. And I go over here and I go, you're responsible for your categories. You stay out of their categories. See, as a manager, that's what I have to do. But I like it when I have that because this person's going to definitely take control and this person's going to take control. But if you don't manage them properly, it causes conflict and one of them eventually is going to leave. because they just don't enjoy it. But when they understand, and this is the other thing about, you know, working with staff members and teaching them personality profiles. But now, when the back staff member understands that they're a melancholy person, a choleric personality, and the front is too, now they not only have their own category that they're in charge of, so there's no conflict, but now they understand the other staff member and why there may be conflict. But what it does is it eliminates conflict is what it does. It'll eliminate 80 to 90% of conflict because now they understand. Now, not only understand the other employee, but but as a manager, I better separate out their responsibilities. And I'll tell you what, when you do that, everything excels real well. So that works when it's done that way. Otherwise, if you don't know it, then you got chaos. And now you got one employee running off, you know, every time you get somebody else, they're running them off. Now that's bad management. You know, the doctor doesn't know personalities and he doesn't know how to manage. Okay. All right, so that's some characteristics relative to the choleric personality.